Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Talk with Patrick. Today, my special guest is Nancy. Hi, Nancy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. So, Nancy, I how I usually start the podcast is I have my guests introduce themselves and tell the listening audience how long we've kind of known each other, and yeah, just go from there. So, why don't we start with that?
So I'm Nancy O'Brien, and we've known each other probably 4 years now. You and I are kind of in the same role in our department, just different service areas. And I remember actually the first time I met you um, was when I was helping with a board or interviews. I was supporting with one, and I had no idea what I was doing. And we were using one of the office spaces in your area. And I remember coming over to your pod and just I must have looked like a deer in headlights because I was a nervous wreck, and you were just so calm and so helpful, and you're like, oh, here's some resources, and yes, yeah, I could totally help you with everything, no problem, we'll get whatever. And I was so grateful for you in that moment, and your kindness. It really showed your kindness and your character, that I was a complete stranger coming to you, and you were like so helpful. And I've just loved you ever since. You were my superhero on that day, um and we've been friends since.
We have been friends since. Uh, Yeah, I always seem to forget. See, whenever I talk to people, they're like, oh, you were this and you were that. I don't even think sometimes about what I say or what I do, but like, I'm really glad that obviously I gave a good first impression because
Absolutely.
yeah, obviously I wanted to make sure that it went smoothly for you because I knew you had just started and I didn't want you to have to like panic because I've been there myself too and it sucks.
Right.
It really
Yeah, and
sucks.
you were so calming, you were just like, you're fine, it's okay, yeah, whatever you need, it's okay. And yeah, and I love the gifts. We
Yes.
send each other fun gifts and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of the other people that are in our department, we were both pregnant at the same time, and you planned a whole surprise baby shower for us, although I figured it out ahead of time.
Yes, you
um,
did.
which probably annoyed you, but it was so thoughtful. Like no one had ever done that for me before. So it was, yeah, it meant a lot. And
Aw.
I love working with you. It's such a pleasure. It's
Aw.
such a And
Well,
so thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
of course. And I mean, this whole podcast could just be about how amazing I am. But,
I could go on for hours
like
for
just
sure.
carry on. Let's just make it all about me. But, anyways, we're going to talk a little bit more about you and because you're a self published writer.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that is super amazing and exciting. Congratulations. Very proud of you. Oh, it's
So
cutting there. Oh, she's using a background, people. She's the ghost. It's the political
yeah, you don't want to
assistant.
actually see my background. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
There she is, my baby.
The beautiful book, The Political Assistant. What a great book. Now, I'll be honest, I'm halfway through the book still. I'm one of those readers where I get super into something, but the minute I get distracted by like life or something else, I forget the book I'm reading and I put it down and I'm like and then for some reason I'm someone that's like, okay, I gotta get back into the book. But then it takes me a while to get back into the book. So no offense, your book is really good. I'm halfway through it. It's just that's just how it is. But I think I even do that with like Nancy Drew books because I love Nancy Drew books, and even those. And like, come on, it's a Nancy Drew book. Like you could finish that in half a day. But I get halfway through sometimes, get distracted, then I'm like, Oh, I gotta get back to the book.
Those are great books. I love Nancy Drew.
Yes, she's a great detective. But
Those
anyways, we're not talking
she
about
is.
Carolyn Keene and Nancy Drew here. Good.
Nancy O'Brien, Nancy Drew, practically the same. So yeah, I started. Okay, so I worked. Where do I start? I worked in municipal politics for about 6 years, on and off, and I worked for a embattled city councilor here at the city of Ottawa. So I had a pretty traumatic experience, and and I can't really go into much detail about it. There's an open OPP investigation right now, so I unfortunately can't talk too much about it. But what I can say is, the news broke in September of 2019. There was a story about someone that had been interviewed by my former boss, and he'd asked them some pretty inappropriate questions. And what ended up happening was it was kind of like an avalanche of more and more information coming out. And what ended up happening was it was a very challenging time for me. I had suppressed a lot of memories, a lot of the trauma that I had. So what was happening was I was kind of having flashbacks where I was being taken back in time, and and then like I was there again, and I was re-experiencing what had happened to me, and then all of a sudden it was like whoosh, and I'm back. It was like this tsunami just kind of came over me, and I was like time traveling, and then I would come back, and it was very difficult. So I ended up turning to writing as memories were starting to come back to me, as I was trying to process what happened to me. um, and I decided that I was going to come forward to the integrity commissioner and tell my story, because there were already a few women that had come out publicly, and I thought that they were so brave. So I thought I had to honor that, and do whatever I could with the information that I had from my personal experiences, and relay it to the integrity commissioner. So I also found, as I was writing my experiences to the integrity commissioner, it was very cathartic. It was very helpful. It really helped with like easing my anxiety. So in going through this process, I kind of realized that writing was really helping me with coping with everything in a healthy way. So I got the idea to, why not? I'd always wanted to write a book since my early 20s. I went to school for journalism. Um, I went to school for print journalism, and then I took broadcast journalism as well at Loyalist College. So I already had the ambition of writing professionally, and I had written. I'd worked for, a magazine, a fishing magazine. I'd worked for weeklies. I'd done a lot of freelance. My gosh, there it is. I'd done a lot of freelance writing and stuff like that. So so yeah, that's where I kind of I had this idea of, okay, well, why don't I write a book? Why don't I kind of take inspiration from my story and write it out in fantasy, and kind of take back my own story, because when you're going through the trauma, you really feel helpless. You feel like there's nothing. You're powerless. And by writing this book, by taking elements from my own story, and um, and and putting it into this fantasy land, I'm kind of taking back control of my own story. I created this character. Her name is Callista Caldwell, and um, and I mean, she's a bit vapid at the beginning of the book, but but I'm hoping that like the character arc by the end of the book you can start to see her come back to her roots. And she's far smarter than me, and she's quicker than me, and she's just way cooler than I'll ever be. Um, which is, poetic license, right? You get to do whatever you you want when you're
Yeah.
writing the story. Um, so yeah, that's I guess the gist of it, the summary of it all. When I was writing the first, what I do when I like for my writing process is I wrote like chapter summaries of like how I wanted the story to progress. And as I was doing that, I realized, okay, I can write either one really, really long book, or I could break it up. Like there were natural breaks in the story. So I wrote it into 3 books. So right now I've actually started the chapter summaries, and I started the first chapter of my second book, which is called, this one's The Political Assistant Election Year. The second one is called The Political Assistant Corruption. So that one is coming out in fall of 2022 is what I gave myself. This one I wrote when I was on maternity leave, and we were all locked down like it was a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't do anything. I have 3 kids. So on the weekends, I try and, take them to the museum or take them to the park and take them around, make memories, stuff like that. But we were all locked down. We couldn't go anywhere. We were just hanging out in our backyards type of thing. So I was able to write my book on the weekends where my husband could watch them and feel pretty guilt free about like that I wasn't enriching my children's lives and stuff like that. So I was able to write it in like 10 months as a result of that, because we were locked down, and that kind of became my hobby. I didn't binge Netflix. I wrote books. I wrote this book. Um, but this time I'm working full time. I have 3 kids. So I'm giving myself 2 years to write it this time. Uh, and I know we're still in the pandemic, but things we're locked down again right now, but only for 28 days, apparently, hopefully, fingers crossed. So, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I'm expecting that I'll be able to like take my kids out to the museum and stuff again. So I won't be able to give as much time. It'll probably be at night type of thing that I'll be writing my book this time around, the second book. So that's why I'm giving myself a little bit more space, a little bit more time to get that second book done. But I want to get all of them done by the time I'm 40. So I'm 36 now. So that's the deadline I gave myself, that by my 40th birthday, I'll have at least finished writing the third book. It doesn't need to be like out and self-published, but like at least have that first draft completed by my 40th birthday. So that way that series will be done by my 40th birthday.
That's awesome. And that's like I'm at a loss of words for, first of all, how like hard it must have been, first of all, like you said at the beginning, uh to come forward, and incredibly brave for you and those other women to come forward. Like that's truly amazing. And as a friend, I can say that I am truly proud of you and proud of those women. And for you to take what you've gone through and write it in a book, a fantasy novel, um, it's truly amazing because, like you said, you've always wanted to write a book ever since you were like in your early 20s. And I know myself, I've thought the same thing, like, oh, I want to write a book and this and that. And I've always bounced back and forth with, will it be fiction, nonfiction, an autobiography, even though I'm young and stuff like that. But that's amazing. And yeah, like I said before, I am halfway through the book, and it really is an interesting read. Like you're reading it and it almost feels like movie-esque almost in the sense of like some of the arch like character arcs and stuff like that. I'm like, I could see this like playing on a screen and like stuff like that. And it's a really good read. And that you're able to break it down into three separate books that you're going to have like written before you're 40 is amazing.
No,
And I agree that yeah, give yourself a little more time for your second one since like we're hopefully coming out of like a lockdown type pandemic right now and we need a bit more time. You have three children, but that's amazing and that must feel so empowering and like I'm so proud of you. And
thank you, Patrick.
that's amazing. And like you just said, what was it? The political assistant, what was it? Oh my gosh, what's
Corruption.
corruption? Corruption. Just hearing the word corruption, I'm like, ooh, I want to pick it up right now and already read it. And I've not even done the first book. So, so
Well, that's good.
that's
That's what I was
awesome.
hoping for.
That's
Well, the
good.
first book, this book, it's setting up the second book.
Okay.
And then the third book is kind of it's going to tie everything together and the character Cal's journey hopefully into maturity, it, into a more self-confident, mature woman. She'll still be pretty like young woman and she'll be in her 30s by the time the series is done. Like that's what I am hoping to accomplish because Callista Cal, she's only 25 at the beginning of this journey, right? Where she doesn't have a lot of self confidence. You know, she's just getting into the professional world. It takes place in 2010. So this book is very much geared towards like millennial women that maybe had like were very career oriented, career ambitions, career aspirations. Um, so yeah, I'm really hoping to kind of to build it up so that by the end, it can show a millennial woman's path um, in a professional world. I think a lot of stories out there are about meeting the perfect guy and then you get married and you have children and that's wonderful and I don't think there's any shame in that. I mean, I've done that myself and I'm very happy with that. But I wanted to tell a different story. I wanted to tell the story of the woman that that she's got career ambitions. She wants to do something um, for her community. So I hope it speaks to that. I hope it speaks to that.
Like I, myself personally just reading it, I'm definitely picking up on that. And that's fantastic. And like you said, there's nothing wrong with the marriage and children and that story, but we need also more stories of like a woman wanting to focus on career and things like that because we've always grown up with those stereotypes of like the woman can't have it all, she can't have a baby and a career, what's up with that and stuff like that. So that's awesome that you're doing that. Now I have to ask, did you get any backlash when the book came out?
No, I've had a lot of support, honestly. People have been very, very supportive, friends and family. The feedback that I've received has been very positive. A lot of what people are telling me is that they can't put it down. They've read it in like 2 days, type of thing, that they really liked it, that it's kind of it covers some serious issues, but it is still kind of a lighthearted, fun read a lot of the time as well. And by the end of it, you really get a sense of what it's like. At least I hope. That's my hope, and that's the feedback that I've received is that you really do get a sense of what it's like working in politics, working in a as a counselor's assistant or a political aide type of thing, just like the crazy hours and how much you're working and the issues that you're dealing with and working with the community, dealing with people in the community and all of that. It hopefully kind of gives you a peek behind the curtain of what that's like. Now, I mean, there have been trolls on Twitter that are trying to say that I'm I'm trying to capitalize on this, and I think that people are going to say that no matter what. That's not why I wrote the book. I wrote the book because it was therapeutic for me, um, and it was an opportunity for me, like I said, to take my story back and to tell my story um, through fantasy. Again, it's anything that I took from my own life, I used it fictitiously. Like it's not verbatim of what has happened to me. There's stuff that is just actually completely made up, just to make the book more interesting. I wanted it to be an interesting read. But yeah, I've received a bit of criticism from trolls on Twitter, but it's the same trolls that are saying that the women that have come forward, the brave women that have come forward, are lying, that they're making it all up, and all sorts of stuff. Which I don't know how you can possibly say that when when you look at the Integrity Commissioner report and what was in there, and there was like 200 odd pages of evidence that came with that second report, and even the first report had all sorts of evidence that backed up what all of the women have been saying. So yeah, I don't really take it too seriously. For the most part, it's been very, very supportive, and it's been wonderful, overwhelming in ways, and like the best way. The support that I have had from the writing community. I've started kind of joining the writing community, and there's this thing called like Writers Lift and shameless self promo Saturdays and stuff, where you can just put your book out there, and there's all sorts of people that have also self published, that are helping each other out, that kind of thing. Also, I've been advocating for changes to the Municipal Act so that future women don't go through what I've gone through. And I've also been opened up to a whole community of people that have been advocating on behalf of women's rights. And they've introduced me to resources for women that have been abused. They've introduced me to all sorts of just this entire network of amazing people. So I'm incredibly grateful at the level of support, just by finally speaking my truth as much as I could. I still can't tell everything because of the OPP investigation, but I have felt less alone, not only because of all of the resources and the networks, but also because I've also had an opportunity to connect with some of the other survivors, and these women are so strong, and I admire them, and I have so much love for them. They are wonderful, wonderful women, and we've been working together to advocate for changes to the Municipal Act as well, and they're just amazing. I have so much respect and admiration for them. For all of the women, whether they came forward or not. I have so much respect and admiration for just going through it and surviving it. It's awesome, because there's a lot of shame attached to going through what we went through. And I know I've been that, and that's what kind of keeps you quiet, is the shame that's associated with it. So that so many women have been able to get past that shame. I'm so happy for them. I think that that's so empowering, and it's so important, because the only person that should be ashamed or feel ashamed is the person that abused their power, right? So and I hope that if there are any other survivors watching, that they know that it's not it's not you to feel ashamed. You did nothing wrong, you know? You did the best that you could in the circumstances, and you were put in a David and Goliath situation, right? Um, so yeah. Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there.
No, it's all
What
good.
one thing I want to also mention about the Municipal Act is there've been a couple of MPPs that have spoken out. Um, Stephen Blay from the Liberal Party, and then Joel Harden from the NDP Party. They both kind of said, yeah, we need to change the Municipal Act. And I think that it is absolutely fabulous that we are finally living in a time where men are advocating for women's rights. You know, for so long, women, we've had to advocate for ourselves and, you know, say we deserve to be treated equally. And now we're living in a time in society where men are saying, they're calling out their colleagues and saying, yeah, this is wrong and we need to do something about it. And I think that's fantastic, and I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful to our male allies, because I think for a long time there was this misconception that, you know, feminism was about, you know, man hating, that you hated men, and that's not the case at all. Like I love men. I am so grateful for my husband. He's an amazing man. My dad, my brother. There's so many wonderful men in this world, and it's feminism is about it's about equality. It's about being treated the same, equity, fair, you know, not being oppressed because of your bits.
Like, absolutely. And, like, again, you speak so well. I'm like at a loss for words. And it just goes to show how, like, yeah, I like how brave and how strong you are, and how brave and strong all of the women that have gone through this are. Those that, like you said, came forward, didn't come forward. Just going through something like that is like a lot. Like, needless to say, it's a lot. Um, so all of you, amazing. And I'm glad that you're getting the supports from like men, like you've said, and that people have reached out, trolls aside from like Twitter and stuff. And I I have a YouTube channel, I have a podcast. Luckily, I haven't received any really trolly things, but you get some trolls anywhere, and I try and tell myself that, you know what, I'm doing this, like you said, for yourself. And it means you're doing something right because it's pissing off some people. So you're pushing the envelope forward for future progression, let's say. And some people aren't ready for change, but change needs to happen, of course. Um, Now, the last question before we start wrapping up my podcast, though, is why did you choose to self publish and not go with a publisher?
Um, I did originally try and send a couple of letters out, and I was chatting with a girlfriend of mine who had self-published her own book, and and I don't know, she made it sound so easy, I guess, and she introduced me to all of these. You know, there's Readsy was the free website that I used so that I could typeset it so it could be like in a book form. And on Amazon, you can just upload your book and you don't have to pay any upfront costs. They just print it as it's ordered, type of thing. And I was able to order some author copies that were at cost for me, so that I've been dropping them off at Octopus Books in the Glebe and Books on Beechwood. I've been dropping off signed copies so that there's, you know, supporting local supporting local. Um, it just, again, this whole thing was about taking my story, taking my story back, empowering myself by self-publishing. it continues that trend of me being in control of my own story, um, and where it ends up, where the book ends up. Um, and yeah, so also I wanted to do when I was first bringing this book out, um, I wanted it to help in some way. It helped me. It helped me so much. But that's why I decided to donate all of the proceeds from the pre sales to the Distress Center of Ottawa. I just thought, when I was going through what I was going through, um, it would have been nice to know that a place like a distress center, that I know it's not therapy, but you can call, you can talk to somebody that's trained. They can maybe tell you about resources in the city that you can use that are free. There's so much opportunity, and um, I just I wish that I had known that I had access to those types of resources when I was in the thick of it, because I felt very alone. So to me, that was kind of a way of helping other survivors that maybe haven't had an opportunity to go to therapy or talk to someone about it. That by putting, it wasn't much, it was $250, but hey, it's something, putting some money towards the distress center that other survivors that have gone through challenging times. And I mean, I think everyone's gone through challenging times. It's a pandemic. 2020 has been a rough year for everyone. So, people that are unemployed and don't have benefits right now, they can call the distress center. It's a resource that's available. So I wanted to help in some way. So that again is part of why I wanted to self-publish, because I had the control over where the money went.
That's that's awesome. And you supporting local stores and bookstores and having a means for pre-sales to go to like a local distress center, like that's truly amazing in itself, where especially during this pandemic where our businesses and organizations are suffering, our local economy is suffering due to this pandemic, that you're using the tools and power that you have to help, even while going through what you're going through and writing your own book. You're still taking what you've gone through and your own self-published amazing book and using that to help local organizations and businesses is amazing. Like,
Thank you.
kudos to you. And obviously this isn't me trying to ego boost you or anything, it's just it is really amazing.
Well,
But
thank you.
uh
Well,
anyway.
you're amazing. We already
Ugh,
covered that at the beginning, though.
stop it, we're not making this about me again. Anyways, but one final question that I always ask at the end of my podcast. Now, it's a question I like to spur on my guest, just so that they answer at the top of their head. So, the question for you is, if you were able to meet with any writer in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. Mm,
You can think about it.
okay. This is so cliche, but probably Jane Austen. I loved her books. She's like, to me, she's like the original feminist, that she was writing books where the women, even though she did have to follow that formula, she worked um, within the limits that were granted to her at the time. But the women were always very independent and intelligent and witty, and that she was writing novels when only men were allowed to write novels and stuff like that. I just think she's fantastic, and I would love to just sit down and have a cup of tea with her and talk about how she developed her characters, and it would be so cool.
That's awesome. For me, it would be okay. It's a toss up, but I'd say for sure probably Mary Shelley that wrote Frankenstein.
Ah,
Just because, kind of similar to you, I believe she had to use her husband's name when the book originally came out because at the time women didn't write stories and stuff. But then it came out later that she actually wrote the book. And I remember having to read it in high school. And it's quite the read. It's quite a thick book, and it's quite the read and very interesting. And just to like, obviously, because I'm a fan of horror, just get into the mind of like what made her even come up with half of these ideas and like what it must have been like to write a book like that in her time, have it released under her husband's name and things like that. I think it would just be truly awesome to kind of sit down with her, get into her mind, and go from there. But I love your answer too. My other one would have been Shirley Jackson, who wrote The Lottery. And I know there's a few other stories she's written, but The Lottery is one of my favorites. I actually did a story time where I read the short story because it's public domain um, on my channel. But she would be another one. But both of them, love it. And Jane Austen, great author, fantastic. But thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences and your story and your wonderful story. For anyone that hasn't gotten it yet, don't forget to pick up a copy of The Political Assistant Election Year by the author Nancy O'Brien. And also, don't forget, you can always check out my podcast anywhere where podcasts are, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or you can always check out my YouTube channel at Patrick Riopel, where I put the video version of it online as well. Now, do you have any closing remarks, Nancy, that you'd like to share?
um, just I guess please visit my website, nancyobrien.ca. There's links to buy the book there. And there's also information about the Municipal Act and how I'd like to see some changes there. And thank you so much for listening to my story. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to have you. Might have to have you when just for another chat or when your second book comes out. You never
Yeah,
know.
sounds good.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Have a great day.